You open your eyes to a sky so wide it feels endless, stars pricking the darkness like scattered jewels. The air is cool, carrying the faint hum of a breeze that might as well be whispering your name. For a moment, you don't quite know if you're lying in your bed or floating above some ancient mountain, until, oh wait, it is Olympus. No big deal, just the hangout spot of every overdramatic god and goddess you've ever half heard about in history class. And honestly, you probably won't survive this without getting a little emotionally tangled, because gods in love are even messier than humans. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Perfect. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mountain glows under moonlight, a throne of stone and cloud rising higher than any mortal could climb. You wander upward, each step carrying you closer to a realm where lightning, love, and jealousy share the same dinner table. The gods are never far. You feel them watching with the kind of curiosity that makes your skin tingle. At first glance, you'd think divine love should be serene, golden, and picture perfect. Spoiler, it's not. On Olympus, passion is a storm. Love is a battlefield. And loyalty? That's just negotiable. Still, there's something magnetic about watching it unfold, like sneaking a peek into the most dramatic soap opera of eternity. The first whispers you catch on the wind tell of a union at the very center of it all, Zeus and Hera. But before you meet them, let yourself stand still beneath the starlight. The stars themselves hold stories, constellations shaped by ancient romances. That's not me exaggerating. It's literally historical fact that Greek astronomers named clusters like Orion, Andromeda, and Perseus after mythic lovers. Imagine lying under the same skies thousands of years ago, hearing someone explain that those dots of light weren't random. They were reminders of heartbreak and love, carved forever into the heavens. You keep walking. The path glimmers, but the ground shifts under your feet like it's testing you. That's the thing about Olympus. It only welcomes you if you're ready for the drama. A quirky thought slides into your head. Maybe this is why the gods loved turning into swans, bulls, or even golden rain, because they too needed disguises to sneak into their own messes. Seriously, golden rain? That's not subtle. That's ancient Netflix-level weird. As the mountain grows brighter, a debate drifts through the air, like the gods themselves left it unresolved. Was divine love ever about romance? Or was it just about power, politics, and pride? Scholars still argue whether Zeus's marriage to Hera was a union of affection or simply a throne-sharing pact. You'll hear both sides soon enough, and neither will sound entirely convincing. Still, even now, you can sense the pulse of something more. Olympus isn't just about power plays. It's about longing, loyalty, betrayal, and the kind of devotion that makes mortals write poetry and philosophers shake their heads. You're stepping into a world where every love story has its own fire, sometimes burning bright, sometimes leaving only smoke. And so, with the stars guiding you and the shadows listening, you prepare to meet the king and queen of this divine soap opera. Their voices are already echoing faintly, fierce and tender, stormy and soft. Zeus and Hera are waiting, and their story is about to unravel before you. The path bends, and suddenly you're not just standing beneath Olympus. You're inside it. Pillars rise higher than your eyes can follow, carved from marble that seems to glow from within. And there, at the very center, are two thrones. They're close enough to touch, yet somehow worlds apart. You already know who they belong to. Zeus sits first in your vision, his presence like a storm barely leashed. His beard glints with the light of thunderclouds, his eyes carrying that dangerous mix of charm and power. The kind of guy who could both save you from a lightning strike and cause in the first place. Beside him, Hera, regal, radiant, sharp as a blade hidden in silk. She's not just a queen. She's the queen, and the only one bold enough to hold her ground beside Zeus. You feel the tension between them, even in silence. Their love is legendary, their their fights equally so. They're the royal pair of Olympus, the ultimate couple's portrait, if the portrait were constantly being redrawn with broken paintbrushes and the occasional lightning bolt. Their story begins, as many godly tales do, with persistence. Zeus wanted Hera, desperately. He courted her, tried to charm her with his usual tricks, but she wasn't impressed. In fact, Hera rejected him flat out for ages. And you know what? Respect. She didn't swoon at the first flash of lightning. Instead, she kept him waiting. According to one version, Zeus even disguised himself as a helpless cuckoo bird, shivering in the rain, until Hera took pity and held him close. In that moment, he transformed back into himself, and their union began. Of course, once married, things got complicated. Zeus had a wandering eye, and by wandering, I mean it practically had frequent flyer miles. Nymphs, mortals, demigoddesses, you name it. The king of gods had a way of making every creature in the universe feel like they were the main character. Hera knew, and she did not take kindly to betrayal. What's fascinating is that in the ancient world, this wasn't just gossip fodder. Their relationship reflected something real. Historically, the Greeks saw marriage not as a romantic ideal, but as a political contract. Love was nice, but alliances, heirs, and status matter more. So in Zeus and Hera's endless drama, you see a mirror of that. Love wrapped in duty, devotion tangled with rivalry. You lean closer, and it's impossible not to notice that Hera's love for Zeus wasn't fragile. It was fierce. She fought to protect their bond, even if it meant unleashing storms of her own. Every time Zeus strayed, Hera struck back, sometimes at him, sometimes at his lovers, and sometimes at the children born from those affairs. Does it sound brutal? Yes, but in a way it's also raw, unfiltered devotion. Hera refused to fade into the background. She demanded recognition, even in the chaos. The palace around you seems to flicker with these stories. One corner hums with laughter, showing Zeus wooing mortals in disguise. Another echoes with Hera's fury, her vengeance trailing across the earth. And in between, you glimpse softer moments, a hand resting on another, a fleeting glance where thunder softens into warmth. They fought, yes, but they also reconciled. Over and over again, as if Olympus itself couldn't function without their union holding it together, however fragile. It makes you wonder, was their love toxic or eternal? Scholars still argue whether Zeus and Hera's marriage should be read as a warning against betrayal or as proof that even divine power can't exist without companionship. Maybe it's both. Some quirky details slip through the cracks of their myth, like the festival of Hera, held in her honor, where women ran foot races dressed in tunics cut short above the knee. A goddess of marriage inspiring competitive track and field? Sure, why not? It shows her influence stretched far beyond Olympus. Mortals wanted to embody her strength, not just her title as wife. And then there's the fact that temples to Hera were some of the oldest in Greece, older than even Zeus's grand sanctuaries. Imagine that. Before people worshipped the thunderbolt, they revered the queen. That says something about how powerful her presence was, even when her husband stole the headlines. You linger between their thrones, watching the two of them. Zeus leans back, eyes scanning the horizon as if looking for his next conquest. Hera sits forward, her gaze sharp, reminding him that she sees everything. For all the turmoil, you sense a strange balance here. It's messy, yes, but also magnetic, like gravity itself, pulling them together even after every explosion. And just as you're about to turn away, you hear Hera laugh, soft, genuine, surprising. Zeus looks at her then, and for the briefest second, the storm quiets. You realize this is what keeps them bound, what makes their love endure across centuries of retellings. Not perfection, but persistence. They fight, they fracture, but somehow, they always return to each other. You step back, the marble floor cool beneath your feet. The royal pair fades into mist, their thrones dissolving until only the hum of Olympus remains. And now, you feel the sea breeze calling you from beyond the mountain. Another story waits, one where desire rolls like waves and passion crashes against the shore. Poseidon is stirring. The sound reaches you first, waves crashing, rolling, retreating, like a heartbeat that belongs to the sea itself. The marble under your feet softens into sand, cool and damp, and a salty wind curls around your face. You blink, and suddenly Olympus feels far behind you. The throne room has dissolved into an endless horizon, and Poseidon, Lord of the Sea, is waiting. He doesn't announce himself with thunder like his brother Zeus. Instead, he rises from the surf, hair tangled with seaweed, trident gleaming with water that drips but never falls. His presence is less like lightning and more like the tide, steady, overwhelming, and absolutely impossible to ignore. You watch as his eyes shift between calm pools and violent whirlpools, depending on where his heart wanders. Poseidon's love stories are never calm. They surge and crash just like the ocean. He loved deeply, often recklessly, leaving a trail of romances that shaped coastlines, kingdoms, and myths. Some tales describe him as tender, others as tempestuous. It's like the ocean itself. One moment you're floating peacefully, the next you're gasping for air. Take Aphrodite, for example. She was a sea nymph, a nereid, and she had zero interest in being queen of the oceans. When Poseidon courted her, she ran away to hide at the edge of the world. Classic move. Poseidon, however, wasn't about to take no for an answer. He sent a dolphin to persuade her, a literal dolphin wingman. And somehow it worked. The dolphin charmed Aphrodite, convinced her to give Poseidon a chance, and she eventually became his queen. Out of gratitude, Poseidon placed the dolphin among the stars, immortalized as the constellation Delphinus. A quirky detail, yes, but it shows that even gods needed a middleman sometimes. And yet, Aphrodite wasn't his only love. Poseidon, much like Zeus, had a wandering heart. He pursued mortal women too, leaving behind sons and daughters who became heroes, monsters, and rulers. One of the most famous was Theseus, the Athenian hero who slayed the Minotaur. Some legends claim Poseidon was his father, gifting him the strength of the sea. It's a reminder that, historically, kings often trace their lineage back to gods. By claiming Poseidon as an ancestor, rulers tied themselves to divine power, giving their reign more legitimacy. But love isn't just about legacy, is it? Poseidon also fell for Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. When she tried to escape him, she transformed into a mare to hide among the horses. Poseidon wasn't fooled. He turned into a stallion, pursued her, and from their union came a horse, Arion, who was said to be immortal. Scholars still argue whether this myth is meant to symbolize fertility between land and sea, or if it was simply a wild attempt to explain why horses are sacred to Poseidon. Either way, the image of the sea god galloping across fields as a stallion is hard to forget. As you listen, you notice something odd about Poseidon's love stories. They rarely end quietly. His affairs create ripples, sometimes literally reshaping coastlines. One myth tells of his affection for a mortal queen named Tyro, who bore him children that became rulers of Greek kingdoms. Another describes his union with Medusa back when she was still a beautiful maiden. Their meeting in Athena's temple led to Medusa's curse, transforming her into the Gorgon. That detail lingers in your mind. Poseidon's passions didn't just affect his lovers. They reshaped myths and destinies. You walk closer to the surf, and every wave seems to whisper another name, another story. The sea doesn't discriminate. It touches every shore, just as Poseidon's love reached across nymphs, mortals, and goddesses alike. But like the sea, his affections could turn stormy. Sailors once prayed to him for safe voyages, offering horses as sacrifices, believing that if they honored his passions, he might calm the waves instead of swallowing their ships. Historically, those sacrifices took place in coastal sanctuaries, where the line between worship and survival blurred. A strange calm washes over you now, as if Poseidon himself has decided to show you his gentler side. You imagine Amphitrite's quiet strength beside him, reigning not just as a partner, but as a balancing force. Their marriage wasn't loud like Zeus and Hera's, but it had its own rhythm, a steady current beneath the crashing waves. Still, you can't ignore the storm in his eyes. Poseidon was never just one thing. He was both savior and destroyer, lover and tormentor, calm waters and raging sea. His romances reflect that duality, each one beautiful and dangerous, a reminder that the ocean gives life, but also takes it away. As the tide swells higher, you feel the pull of another story rising from the depths, one darker than the rest. This one doesn't shimmer like the sea's surface. It waits below, in the underworld, where shadows stretch long and a forbidden romance quietly blossoms. Hades and Persephone are waiting for you. The sea's roar fades into silence, and the sand under your feet hardens into black stone. The air grows cooler, heavy with the scent of earth after rain. You've left the waves behind, descending deeper and deeper, until the light above becomes nothing more than a memory. Here, in the underworld, shadows press close, but they're not empty. They whisper, they hum. They carry a story that mortals have told for thousands of years, a love story born not in sunlight, but in darkness. Hades steps into view, not with thunder or tides, but with a quiet authority that makes the ground itself bow. He's not the monster people sometimes imagine. His robe is dark as midnight, his crown shaped from iron and flame. In his hand, a staff carved from obsidian, and at his feet, Cerberus, 3 heads, 3 sets of teeth, tails wagging like an oversized puppy who doesn't realize he's terrifying. Hades' gaze meets yours, calm and heavy, as though he's always known you would arrive. And then, from the shadows, she appears, Persephone. At first, she glimmers faintly, her hair threaded with blossoms that shouldn't be able to grow here. She brings color to the gloom, softening it without breaking it. It's clear she doesn't belong entirely to this world, and yet she does. That's the paradox of their love. Half above, half below, never entirely one or the other. The tale begins with abduction. There's no avoiding that. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and she spent her days among fields of grain and wildflowers. Hades saw her, wanted her, and, depending on which version you hear, either courted her awkwardly or snatched her straight into his chariot, the ground swallowing them whole. Romantic? Not exactly. But myths aren't always about comfort. They're about transformation. Demeter, furious, searched the world for her daughter. Crops withered, rivers dried, and mortals starved as the goddess refused to let the earth flourish until Persephone returned. The balance of life itself tilted, all because of love. Historically, this myth explained the seasons. When Persephone was above ground, Demeter rejoiced, and spring returned. When Persephone descended again, Demeter mourned, and winter fell. A neat little story, yes, but also a profound reminder of how love can reshape nature itself. Still, there's debate here. Scholars still argue whether Persephone was only a victim, stolen and trapped, or whether she became queen by choice, stepping in her power in the underworld. Some versions hint that she ate the pomegranate seeds willingly, binding herself to Hades not as prisoner, but as partner. Was it love? Was it fate? Or was it reluctant compromise? The ambiguity makes their story timeless. You look closer, and you see the strange tenderness between them. Hades doesn't parade his conquests like Zeus, nor does he rage like Poseidon. He rules quietly, steadily, and in Persephone's presence, there's a stillness to him, like a man who finally found the one piece of sunlight he can hold. And Persephone, though torn from her mother's fields, grows into something fiercer here. She is no longer just Demeter's child. She is queen in her own right, mistress of shadows, able to command spirits with a single glance. It's almost funny. Mortals feared Hades more than any other god, yet his love story is one of the most enduring. You can still find it etched in ancient art, whispered in poetry, retold in operas and novels. The underworld may have been a place of fear, but in Persephone's presence, it became something more balanced, even beautiful. A quirky little fact slips in here. In some ancient Greek rituals, people baked Persephone's cakes, tiny offerings shaped like pomegranates, to honor both fertility and the inevitability of death. Imagine that. Dessert as divine symbolism. Sweet, slightly ominous, but deeply human. As you walk further, the underworld around you shifts. You see fields of asphodel where souls wander, quiet rivers glimmering faintly with starlight, and beyond them, Persephone's throne beside Hades's. They don't touch often, but when they do, it's soft, deliberate, powerful. Their love isn't about passion flaring and fading. It's about constancy, about a bond that survives the darkest shadows. And maybe that's why their story endures. It's not just about being stolen away. It's about what you become in the place you never expected to call home. Persephone's myth reminds you that even in the deepest night, there's room for growth, for blossoms, for a kind of love that thrives against all odds. You take a step back, and the shadows loosen their grip. The underworld fades, but you keep the image with you. Two thrones side by side, darkness wrapped gently around a bloom of light. When you look up again, you're not underground anymore. You're standing on the edge of a forest, where sunlight breaks through the leaves. Somewhere ahead, laughter flickers, quick as a bird's wing. You hear the sharp whistle of an arrow, the pounding of feet, and the sound of someone running, not away from death, but away from desire itself. Apollo is chasing, and Daphne is fleeing. The underworld's chill lingers only a moment before sunlight blinds you, flooding the forest in golden fire. Birds scatter, leaves tremble, and the air itself hums with energy. You've stepped straight into a chase, and you can feel the urgency in the earth beneath your feet. Apollo, the radiant god of the sun, strides forward with a bow slung across his back, hair glowing like dawn itself. His eyes burn with intensity, not the calm warmth of a hearth, but the searing blaze of someone who's decided you will be mine. And then there's Daphne, fleet-footed, her tunic whipping at her knees as she runs through the trees. She isn't laughing. She isn't flirting. She's running with every ounce of determination in her body. Her heartbeat is thunder, her breath sharp as broken glass. This is no playful pursuit. It's desperate, defiant. The story begins, as many myths do, with pride. Apollo had just defeated Python, the serpent of Delphi, and felt unstoppable. He mocked Eros, the little god of desire, basically telling him, "Your arrows are child's play compared to my power." Not Apollo's smartest move. Eros, stung by the insult, took his revenge in the pettiest way possible. He shot 2 arrows, one tipped with gold, filling Apollo with overwhelming passion. The other tipped with lead, striking Daphne, filling her with utter rejection. Boom, define mishmash. The chase was set. You feel the ground quake as Apollo closes in, his words echoing through the trees. He promises devotion, swears he'll protect her, insists he only wants to worship her beauty. But Daphne doesn't slow. She doesn't want worship. She wants freedom. Historically, this myth touched a nerve in ancient Greece. Women were often defined by marriage and family, but Daphne wanted neither. She was devoted to Artemis, the virgin huntress, and she asked her father, the river god Peneus, to let her remain unmarried. That defiance, choosing independence over romance, was radical. It's no wonder her story was told and retold. The chase builds, and you can almost feel Apollo's breath on the back of her neck. Just as his hand reaches for her, Daphne cries out to her father for help. In an instant, her body changes. Her skin hardens into bark, her arms stretch into branches, her hair spills upward as leaves. Her feet root deep into the earth, and she becomes a laurel tree. Apollo, stunned, embraces her trunk. His passion doesn't fade, but it twists into reverence. He declares the laurel sacred, a crown for victors and poets alike. There's something haunting in that moment. A god so powerful he can control the sun, left powerless before a tree. Was it tragedy or triumph? Scholars still argue whether Daphne's transformation should be read as liberation, choosing eternity as a tree over submission, or as punishment, a reminder that defying desire comes at a cost. Oddly enough, this myth still shapes the world today. In ancient Greece, laurel wreaths were awarded to Olympic champions and scholars, a tradition that spread into Rome and beyond. Even the phrase, resting on your laurels, comes from this tale, a quirky linguistic relic of Apollo's unfulfilled love. Imagine carrying a piece of heartbreak every time someone praises your success. You walk closer to Daphne's tree, her leaves trembling softly in the wind. Apollo's hand rests against her bark, his expression torn between grief and awe. He whispers vows to her, promising that her leaves will never wither, that her branches will always remain green. It's not the romance he wanted, but it's devotion all the same. And you can't help but wonder, is love still love when it isn't shared? Apollo adored her, immortalized her, yet Daphne never returned his passion. Maybe her story isn't about romance at all. Maybe it's about boundaries, about the right to say no, even to a god. The forest quiets. Apollo turns away, laurel crown in hand, and the golden light softens into twilight. You step back, carrying the image of branches that refuse to bow, even under divine pursuit. But before you can linger, the forest stirs again. This time, it isn't the chase of desire. It's the companionship of equals, the thrill of hunting side by side. Somewhere in the shadows, a huntress lifts her bow, and beside her strides a mortal whose presence sparks something rare in her heart. Artemis and Orion are waiting. The twilight deepens, and the forest shifts around you. The air grows sharper, tinged with pine and moonlight, as if the night itself has pulled you into its arms. Here, silence isn't empty. It's alive, punctuated by the rustle of deer slipping through undergrowth and the distant hoot of an owl. You can sense her before you see her. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, fierce and untouchable, moving like the wind through the trees. She isn't alone. Striding beside her is Orion, broad-shouldered, mortal-born, but larger than life. His steps are steady, his laughter booming like a bonfire crackling in the distance. Where Apollo radiates fire and certainty, Orion feels like earth, solid, warm, grounding. And yet, when he looks at Artemis, there's no claim in his eyes, only respect. That's rare for a mortal staring down a goddess. Their story is wrapped in mist, tangled in contradictions, and that's exactly what makes it compelling. Some say they were hunting companions, bonded by their shared love of wild places, chasing stags under the moon. Others insist it went deeper, that Orion was the only man Artemis ever allowed into her heart. Scholars still argue whether Artemis truly loved him romantically, or if their connection was something pure, a friendship so strong it threatened the gods themselves. What's clear is that their bond unsettled people. Artemis was a sworn virgin goddess, devoted to freedom and independence. She wasn't supposed to fall in love. And yet, with Orion, the rules blurred. You watch as they move together through the forest, arrows flying in perfect sync, laughter spilling into the night air. It's easy to believe they found joy in each other, the kind that doesn't demand, just exists. But this is Olympus, and joy never lasts long without interference. Enter Apollo, Artemis's twin brother, bright as the sun and twice as meddling. He didn't like Orion, maybe jealous, maybe protective, maybe both. One version of the story has him tricking Artemis into shooting Orion. He challenged her to hit a distant black speck on the horizon with her arrow. She loosed her shot, flawless as always, only to discover she had pierced Orion swimming in the sea. Imagine that, killing the person you loved most, all because of a brother's scheme. Other tellings are no kinder. Some say Gaia, the earth herself, sent a giant scorpion to strike Orion down because his boasting offended the gods. Either way, tragedy wraps itself around their story. Orion dies, and Artemis's grief is so deep she places him among the stars. Look up at the night sky. Even today, Orion's belt shines, a constellation born of loss. And, in cosmic irony, the scorpion that killed him was placed in the heavens too, forever chasing him across the zodiac. Historically, these constellations mattered. Ancient sailors navigated by Orion, trusting his stars to guide them across seas. Farmers marked his rising and setting to measure planting seasons. In a way, Artemis's devotion ensured Orion would never vanish. His memory literally shaped how mortals survived. A quirky detail slips in here. Orion was sometimes described as so tall he could stride across the sea without drowning, with only his head above the waves. Picture that. Half terrifying, half cartoonish. A man so big he could treat the ocean like a puddle, yet still brought to his knees by love and fate. You glance back at Artemis now. She stands in the clearing, moonlight pooling at her feet, bow lowered. Her face is unreadable, but her eyes linger on the stars. There's no weeping here, no collapse into despair. Instead, there's resolve, the kind that comes from knowing loss doesn't erase love. Her bond with Orion was written into the sky, a story mortals would tell every time they tilted their heads back to wonder. It leaves you thinking. Maybe love isn't always about happy endings. Sometimes it's about impact, how deeply someone reshapes your world, even if they don't stay in it. Artemis and Orion remind you that love can be brief, messy, even tragic, and still carve itself into eternity. The night deepens, and the stars above seem to pulse brighter, like they know you've understood. But before you could drift too long under Orion's glow, a new sound interrupts the stillness. It's heavier, louder, metal clanging against stone, whispers of passion slipping through cracks in Olympus's golden halls. This time, it isn't about freedom or tragedy. It's about fire and desire, secrecy and scandal. The kind of love that burns bright but never stays hidden for long. Ares and Aphrodite are waiting. The forest's hush breaks like glass. The crisp scent of pine fades into smoke, musk, and something sweetly intoxicating, almost like spilled wine. The shadows tilt, and suddenly you're not among trees, but within a golden chamber, walls gleaming with torchlight, every surface shimmering as though it's seen too many secrets. You can almost hear laughter echoing, soft gasps swallowed by marble halls, and footsteps that definitely shouldn't be heard at this hour. This is the realm of passion, not quiet devotion, not tragic longing, but raw, untamed fire. And at the center of it, of course, are Ares and Aphrodite. Ares is all heat and muscle, the god of war, pacing with a restless energy that makes the ground seem nervous beneath him. His armor clinks faintly, but even stripped of it, he radiates danger. Then there's Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and every heart flutter you've ever blamed on hormones. Her presence makes the air thicker, sweeter, like honey poured over flame. Together, they're the definition of forbidden attraction. Here's the kicker. Aphrodite isn't supposed to be with Ares. She's married to Hephaestus, the smith of Olympus. Their match was practical, forged in bargains rather than passion. But passion has its own agenda, and Ares, bold, fiery, reckless, was everything Hephaestus wasn't. When Aphrodite and Ares slipped into each other's arms, it wasn't just an affair. It was a scandal with thunderclouds waiting on the horizon. The two of them tried to keep it quiet, sneaking into chambers, hiding behind curtains of silk. But Olympus doesn't stay silent for long. Helios, the all-seeing sun, caught them in the act. And, like any nosy neighbor, he wasted no time spilling the secret to Hephaestus. What followed is one of the strangest love trap stories you'll ever hear. Hephaestus, hurt but clever, forged an invisible net of unbreakable chains. He spread it across his bed like a spider's web and waited. When Ares and Aphrodite lay together, the trap sprang shut, binding them in front of the entire pantheon. Imagine that. Gods crowded into a room, stifling laughter, whispering commentary, watching the goddess of love and the god of war caught like careless teenagers. Even Poseidon, usually brooding in his tides, had a chuckle. The odd detail? Some versions say Poseidon, of all gods, begged Hephaestus to let them go, embarrassed by the spectacle. Apparently, even immortals had limits when it came to awkward family drama. But scandal aside, their connection ran deeper than lust. Ares and Aphrodite weren't just a fling, they were balance. Love and war, beauty and chaos, tenderness and destruction. Their children embodied this union. Eros, god of desire, Phobos and Deimos, spirits of fear and terror, and Harmonia, goddess of harmony. Isn't that wild? Out of their fire came both extremes, panic and peace, desire and balance. It's almost poetic, if slightly terrifying. Historically, this love story wasn't just juicy gossip for the ancient Greeks. It reflected something bigger, the constant tension between passion and reason. Cities honored Aphrodite and Ares together, believing that where there was love, war followed, and where there was war, love clung close behind. Even philosophers debated it. Scholars still argue whether their affair was a moral warning, showing the dangers of lust, or a recognition that passion, messy as it is, fuels human life as much as strategy or order. You walk through the chamber now, watching them move together in whispers and glances. Aphrodite's laugh is light, defiant, unashamed. Ares leans close, grinning like someone who knows the risk is half the thrill. There's danger in their love, but also honesty. Neither hides what they feel, not even from the gods who sneer at them. It makes you wonder, maybe the real scandal isn't that they loved each other, but that they refused to bury that fire in silence. After all, isn't passion always a little rebellious? The torches flicker, and the scene dissolves. The chamber collapses into the clang of hammers, the hiss of molten metal, the roar of a forge burning hot enough to melt jealousy itself. You realize you've walked straight into the heart of Hephaestus's workshop, where the betrayed husband turns pain into fire and steel. The story isn't done. Not until you see the god of the forge's own heart laid bare. The heat hits you first. It rolls off the walls in waves, thick and heavy, carrying the smell of iron and smoke. Sparks leap into the air, brief flashes of gold before disappearing into shadow. You're inside Hephaestus's forge now, the beating heart of Olympus's machinery. Every surface gleams with half-finished weapons, shields, and ornaments, hammered into perfection by the god who was never supposed to be perfect himself. Hephaestus stands before the anvil, broad-shouldered, scarred, his hands blackened from years of shaping fire. He doesn't shine like Apollo, nor strut like Ares. Instead, he moves with patience, every strike deliberate. There's beauty in it, even if he doesn't see it himself. The clang of the hammer becomes a heartbeat, steady and stubborn. This is the god Aphrodite was promised to. Not chosen out of passion, but bargained into marriage as a kind of cosmic irony. The goddess of beauty wedded to the god of deformity. At least, that's how the myths describe him. Thrown from Olympus at birth because Hera deemed him unworthy, Hephaestus limped ever after. And yet, in his forge, he was unmatched. He crafted Zeus's thunderbolts, Achilles' armor, and even the golden chains that trapped his own wife and her lover. His hands may have been scarred, but they shaped eternity. You watch him pause, wiping sweat from his brow. There's no bitterness in his face now, just focus. But you know what lies beneath. Betrayal, loneliness, the sting of love unreturned. Imagine being married to Aphrodite, only to know her heart burned elsewhere. Some say he never stood a chance. Others believe he cared so deeply that he refused to let go, even when the truth cut sharper than any blade he forged. A quirky story flickers into your mind. Hephaestus once crafted golden mechanical handmaidens to help him walk and serve at his workshop. Picture it. Elegant robots before robots were even a thing, made of metal and magic, clinking softly as they carried tools. It shows that even in loneliness, his genius kept him company. Still, loneliness can harden into something else. When he caught Ares and Aphrodite in his net, it wasn't just revenge, it was proof. Proof that even gods can be humiliated. But what's fascinating is what happened afterward. Hephaestus didn't crumble. He kept working, forging creations so extraordinary that even his rivals depended on him. His pain became art, his heartbreak a furnace that burned hotter than Olympus's gossip ever could. Historically, his worship was strongest not on Olympus but among mortals. Craftsmen, blacksmiths, artisans, ordinary people who knew the feel of calloused hands and blistering fire, looked to him as their patron. While Zeus had his temples of grandeur and Aphrodite had her shrines of flowers, Hephaestus had the forge, smoky and loud, where mortals prayed for skill, not beauty. He represented resilience, the idea that imperfection doesn't disqualify you, it defines you. And yet, even as he worked, he loved. Some myths say he pursued Aglaia, one of the Graces, after Aphrodite drifted further away. Unlike his first marriage, this one was gentler, less scandalous. Maybe not the fiery passion of Olympus, but perhaps the steadiness he deserved. Scholars still argue whether this second union should be read as a consolation prize, or as proof that even gods find healing after heartbreak. The forge blazes higher now, and you catch sight of something extraordinary. It's not a weapon, not a chain, but a small delicate piece. A golden necklace, intricate and shining, almost fragile. Hephaestus holds it tenderly, as if it's the one thing he's allowed himself to craft out of love rather than necessity. For all his scars, for all his betrayals, there's still warmth in his chest. You realize his story isn't just about being the wounded husband. It's about transformation. While Ares and Aphrodite lived in secrecy, Hephaestus forged openly, each strike declaring, "I will not disappear." His love may have been unreciprocated, but his legacy outshone even the scandals. The hammer lowers. The sparks fade. The forge quiets, but its heat lingers in your bones. And just as you think you've seen enough of heartbreak turned into resilience, a playful breeze brushes past your ear. It smells faintly of citrus and sweet wine. The air lightens, buzzing with laughter, quick footsteps, and the rustle of a traveler's cloak. You know who this is before you even turn. The trickster with a grin, the messenger with winged sandals, the flirt who never takes anything too seriously. Hermes is waiting to tell you his stories. The forge's heavy smoke clears, swept away by a breeze so light it feels like mischief brushing your cheek. You blink, and suddenly the world is brighter, faster. The ground beneath you glimmers like polished stone, and laughter flits past you, quick and elusive, like a shadow you can't quite catch. Hermes is here. He doesn't arrive with a storm or a crown, but with an easy grin, sandals tipped with wings, and a cloak that shifts like it's never decided which way to hang. His staff, the caduceus, gleams in his hand, coiled with twin serpents who look like they might wink at you if you stare too long. Hermes is the messenger, the trickster, the god who slips between worlds as easily as others slip into bed. And if Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades are Olympus's thunder, waves, and shadows, Hermes is its laughter, its whispers, its sly wink at the audience. And he is, without question, a flirt. Unlike the tragic unions you've seen so far, Hades and Persephone bound by fate, Artemis and Orion torn apart, Hermes doesn't brood. His romances are quick, scattered, playful. He flits from goddess to nymph to mortal, never staying long enough to be tied down. Where Ares and Aphrodite burned with scandal, Hermes leaves sparks and moves on before anyone can snuff them out. One story tells of him wooing Aphrodite herself. Yes, the goddess of love. Their union produced Hermaphroditus, a child who embodied both masculine and feminine beauty. That myth fascinated ancient thinkers, a living embodiment of duality. Scholars still argue whether Hermaphroditus should be seen as a symbol of harmony, of blurred boundaries, or of something that made the Greeks deeply uncomfortable. But for Hermes, it was just another fling, another story added to his already chaotic resume. Then there was Penelopeia, a mountain nymph with whom Hermes fathered Pan, the wild, goat-footed god of the woods and music. Imagine Hermes, sly and smiling, handing over this odd little bundle with horns and hooves. The Olympians were horrified, but Hermes? He laughed. Pan, like his father, became a symbol of freedom, wildness, and cheeky rebellion. And Hermes didn't stop there. He's linked with countless lovers, mortals who found themselves swept up in his charm, nymphs who caught his eye for a day, maybe two. Some myths even suggest he pursued Persephone, sneaking into the underworld for a chance at her affection. Bold, right? Especially when Hades doesn't exactly take kindly to visitors. You notice something peculiar as you walk with him. Hermes never seems to stay in one place long enough to let sadness catch up. Where others love with intensity, he loves with curiosity. To him, affection is less about forever and more about the thrill of now. Oddly enough, that makes him one of the most relatable gods. Not every romance has to be epic. Sometimes it's just about connection, however fleeting. Historically, Hermes was beloved not only as a lover, but as a protector of travelers, shepherds, and even thieves. Merchants prayed to him for profit, athletes for victory, and lovers for quick-witted charm. He represented movement, of bodies, of words, of hearts. In a way, his flirtations mirrored the Greeks' view of him. Always in motion, always slipping away before you could pin him down. And here's your quirky fact of the night. Statues of Hermes, called Herms, were often just stone pillars with his head and, well, his rather generously carved manhood sticking out the front. These were placed along roadsides as protective markers. Imagine walking home after a long day, seeing one of those, and thinking, ah yes, Hermes is watching over me. Subtle? Not at all. Effective? Apparently. You glance back at him now. He's leaning casually against a tree that wasn't there a moment ago, twirling his staff, eyes glinting like someone who already knows your next thought. His smile is warm but mischievous, promising that even if you fall for him, he'll vanish before dawn. And maybe that's okay. Not every love story needs permanence. Some are just about the joy of being seen, if only for a heartbeat. The breeze picks up again, tugging you forward. It carries a sweeter scent this time. Wine, ripe grapes, and something heady that makes your head spin. Laughter drifts through the air, but it's softer now, more tender. You hear footsteps on sand, the quiet sob of someone abandoned, and the gentle promise of rescue. This isn't Hermes' quick spark. This is a deeper fire, a love that redeems. Dionysus and Ariadne are waiting. The breeze slows, thickening into something richer, heady, warm, like wine spilling from a goblet. You blink, and suddenly you're not on Olympus anymore. You're standing on the shore of a quiet island, the sand cool beneath your feet, the sea stretching endlessly under a sky stained with fading twilight. The waves lap gently, but there's sorrow in the air, like a sob held too long. There she is, Ariadne, the mortal princess who gave everything and was left with nothing. You see her sitting by the shoreline, her dress torn, her crown tilted, her eyes red. She had once been the savior of a hero, Theseus, the great Athenian who braved the labyrinth. She gave him the golden thread to escape the Minotaur, risked her father's wrath, and left her home for him. In return, he abandoned her here, on the lonely island of Naxos, while she slept. It's the kind of breakup you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. But the story doesn't end in heartbreak. It shifts. The air trembles. From the horizon comes music, faint but swelling. Pipes, drums, and voices singing wild hymns. Torches glow in the distance, carried by dancers whose steps are half chaos, half ritual. And at the center of it all, crowned with ivy and laughter, is Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and ecstasy. He's no polished Olympian in gleaming armor. His hair is wild, his robes loose, his smile both tender and unrestrained. He looks like freedom itself. Dionysus sees Ariadne and does not turn away. He kneels before her, takes her hand, and lifts her from despair. Where Theseus abandoned, Dionysus adores. He offers not a throne of Athens, but a crown of stars. Their love burns quick and deep, a celebration rather than a negotiation. You watch as he places that crown, a golden diadem, upon her head. The night sky responds, glittering brighter, as if to applaud the gesture. Some myths say Zeus himself cast her crown into the heavens, where it became the constellation Corona Borealis. A mortal girl's heartbreak turned into eternal light. And here's your historical nugget. Ancient Greeks actually traced this constellation in the summer sky, telling Ariadne's story each time it rose. It wasn't just a myth. It was a stargazer's comfort, proof that even abandonment could transform into immortality. Dionysus and Ariadne's bond was more than romance. It was redemption. She found not just love, but worship. He made her his queen, not for politics, but for passion. Together, they embodied joy after despair, life after loss. Scholars still argue whether this myth was meant as a warning, that betrayal can lead to ruin, or as hope, that new beginnings can bloom from heartbreak. And then, the odd detail you wouldn't expect. In some versions, Ariadne dies tragically even after finding love, sometimes struck down by Artemis, other times swallowed by the earth. But Dionysus, unwilling to lose her, descends into the underworld to bring her back, just as he did for his mother, Semele. That's how fierce his devotion ran. He was the god of madness and celebration. Yes, but also of resurrection and refusal to accept loss. You notice how the island has changed now. What was once quiet and sorrowful is alive with music, torches, and dance. Ariadne no longer sits in despair. She twirls, laughing, her crown glinting in torchlight. Dionysus watches, not as a conqueror, but as someone who is simply happy to witness her joy. It makes you think, not all divine romances are doomed. Some, rare as they are, speak of healing. A mortal betrayed by a hero found her true place with a god. And in her story, you see a kind of promise that love can arrive when you least expect it, that even despair can become starlight. The drums soften now, fading into a gentler rhythm. The torches dim, and the revelers retreat into mist. You step forward, and the island dissolves beneath your feet. What replaces it is a quieter scene, a soft chamber, candlelit, filled with the hush of wings and whispers. On a bed lies a mortal girl, her eyes closed, while above her hovers a figure with unseen features, radiant yet hidden in shadow. It's a love story whispered through time, perhaps the most tender of them all. This is the tale of Eros and Psyche. The sea and wine-scented laughter fade, replaced by stillness, softer, more fragile. You find yourself in a candlelit chamber, shadows trembling along the walls, and in the center lies a mortal woman. Her name is Psyche, and she's beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that people whispered she outshone even Aphrodite. That's where the trouble began. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty herself, wasn't thrilled about mortals stealing her spotlight. Imagine scrolling through Olympus's version of social media and realizing your divine account has fewer likes than a human girl selfie. Insulted, Aphrodite ordered her son, Eros, the god of desire, to punish Psyche. His task? Make her fall in love with the most hideous creature imaginable. But here's the twist. When Eros looked at her, he fell for her instead. Classic rom-com plot twist, except with wings and divine arrows. Eros kept himself hidden, though. He whisked Psyche away to a palace, so magical it seemed woven from dreams. Invisible servants catered to her. Food appeared at her command, and every night her mysterious lover came to her in darkness. He whispered words of affection, held her gently, and vanished before dawn. She felt adored but also haunted by the question, who is he? Her sisters visited, planting seeds of doubt. If he won't show you his face, maybe he's a monster, they hissed. That's when Psyche's curiosity won. One night, she lit a lamp to see him, and the glow revealed not a beast, but Eros himself, radiant, beautiful, divine. For a moment she marveled, entranced. But a drop of hot oil slipped from the lamp, burning him. Betrayed by her lack of trust, Eros fled. That moment stings, doesn't it? You can almost hear the silence after his wings disappear into the night. Psyche, left in the empty palace, realizes she's lost the one thing she hadn't even known she wanted, a love that saw her not just as beautiful, but as beloved. But she wasn't done. Unlike so many tragic tales, Psyche refused to collapse. She begged Aphrodite to let her prove her worth. The goddess, still petty about the whole mortals trending higher than me thing, set Psyche impossible tasks. Sort an endless heap of seeds, fetch golden wool from violent rams, descend into the underworld to retrieve beauty itself from Persephone. Each task was brutal, and yet Psyche completed them, often with quiet help, from ants, from reeds, from unseen allies. The quirky part? That underworld journey included a warning not to open Persephone's box of beauty. Naturally, Psyche couldn't resist. Inside wasn't beauty, but a sleep like death, and she collapsed. Honestly, Greek myths really had it out for curiosity. Here's where history slides in. Psyche's tale comes to us not from the earliest Greek myths, but from the Roman novel The Golden Ass by Apuleius, written in the 2nd century CE. It's one of the few fully developed love stories between a god and mortal preserved in such detail. Scholars still argue whether it was meant as pure entertainment, a philosophical allegory of the soul, since Psyche means soul, or a mix of both. Back to the chamber, you see Eros return, hovering over Psyche's still form. His love outweighs his hurt. He wipes away the sleep with a touch, revives her, and pleads their case to Zeus himself. And for once, Zeus doesn't complicate things. Instead, he grants Psyche immortality, allowing her to join Eros on Olympus. Their wedding is celebrated with ambrosia and music, the kind of union that feels almost like a reward not just for Psyche, but for every mortal who ever longed for something greater than the limits of their life. Together, they embody trust restored, love earned, and devotion that survives trial. You realize this is one of the rare happy endings. No betrayal, no eternal punishment, no tragic, and then they were stars. Just love made whole. And after so many tales of jealousy and scandal, doesn't that feel refreshing? The candles flicker once more, and you feel the air shifting again. From chambers of devotion, you're carried upward into skies that shimmer with constellations. Familiar shapes form: a bull, a swan, an eagle. Not all stars belong to heroes. Some mark the endless pursuits of Zeus himself, lover of mortals, shapeshifter, king, and chaos rolled into one. The sky waits, ready to tell you the stories of the mortal queens of Zeus. The chamber dissolves, and suddenly you're beneath an open night sky. Stars sprawl endlessly above you. Constellations stitched together like gossip etched in light. A bull charges across the heavens. A swan glides with wings outstretched. An eagle soars, talon sharp. Each of these shapes hides a story, and at the center of them all is one god. Zeus, king of Olympus, notorious shapeshifter and serial pursuer of love, if you can call his endless pursuits love. You feel the air thrum with power as Zeus's presence fills the scene. His thunderclouds aren't here for judgment, but for seduction. Where other gods might fall in love once or twice, Zeus makes a hobby of it. Mortals, nymphs, even fellow deities, no one is entirely safe from his gaze. The stars above are a constellation map of his affairs, proof that desire leaves trails brighter than lightning. Take Europa, for instance. A Phoenician princess, she strolled along the shore one day when Zeus spotted her. But instead of descending in godly splendor, he disguised himself as a white bull, gentle, beautiful, with eyes soft enough to win her trust. Europa climbed onto his back, and in an instant, the bull leapt into the sea, carrying her across the waves to Crete. There, Zeus revealed himself, and Europa became the mother of kings. Her name still echoes today in the continent itself. That's your historical fact tucked neatly into a love story. Europe bears her name. Then there's Leda. Zeus didn't bother with bulls this time. He came as a swan, gliding gracefully across the water. The result? Twin offspring of legend. Helen, whose beauty would launch the Trojan War, and the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, later immortalized as the constellation Gemini. Imagine your dad being the king of the gods, but also a swan. Awkward family dinners guaranteed. And don't forget Danae, locked away in a bronze chamber by her father, who feared a prophecy that her son would kill him. Danae seemed untouchable. But Zeus had other ideas. He came to her not as a bull or a swan, but as a shower of golden light, slipping through cracks in the ceiling. From that union came Perseus, the hero who would one day slay Medusa. A shimmering, almost poetic image, love descending not as a man, but as golden rain. Scholars still argue whether this myth reflects divine romance or veiled metaphor for power forcing its way through barriers. Of course, not all these stories sparkle. Behind the shimmering disguises lies a darker truth. Zeus's romances were often less about love and more about domination. Mortals rarely had a choice. The myths, however, preserve them as legendary unions, sometimes glossing over the cost. Here's a quirky detail that makes you pause. In some traditions, the eagle constellation, Aquila, is tied not to a mortal woman, but to Ganymede, a Trojan prince of extraordinary beauty. Zeus, enamored, carried him to Olympus as his cupbearer and, in some stories, lover. To soothe Ganymede's grieving parents, Zeus gifted them horses swift enough to outrun any wind. Only Zeus would think, "Sorry I stole your son, but hey, here's some horses." As you drift beneath the stars, you notice how many of them shimmer with Zeus's choices. His loves birthed not just heroes and queens, but entire dynasties, wars, and myths that shaped the Greek imagination. To the ancients, these stories explained lineage, legitimized rulers, and tied mortal lives to the heavens. To you, walking quietly beneath the constellations, it feels more like a reminder that power and passion can redraw the sky itself. The stars begin to blur now, their outlines stretching, bending, until the constellations twist into darker forms. You see a woman weeping, another screaming, another fleeing. These aren't queens elevated to the stars, but mortals who paid the price of divine love. Tragedies linger in the shadows, whispering of ruin that followed beauty. The stories of Semele, Callisto, and others wait for you now, the tragedies of heroic loves. The constellations fade, their bright outlines dissolving into darker shadows. You find yourself walking through a forest at dusk, the air heavy with silence. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots. The mood has shifted. No more glittering crowns or playful disguises. These are the stories where love with gods doesn't bring crowns or constellations. It brings tragedy. The first figure you notice is Semele, a Theban princess. She's radiant, carrying the kind of confidence that made even Zeus pause. He loved her, or at least claimed he did. But Hera, ever watchful and never forgiving, wasn't about to let this romance pass unpunished. She disguised herself as an old woman, whispered doubts into Semele's ear, and convinced her to ask Zeus for proof of his divinity. Poor Semele. She asked. Zeus swore an oath he couldn't break, and when he revealed himself in his full, thunderous glory, the sight incinerated her. Mortals weren't built to withstand lightning in its purest form. But in that fire, her unborn child survived. Zeus sewed the infant into his thigh, carrying him until birth. That child was Dionysus, the god of wine, joy, and frenzy. Out of tragedy came one of Olympus's most colorful deities, but Semele herself was reduced to ash. Then comes Callisto, a nymph devoted to Artemis. She vowed chastity, joining the huntress's band. But Zeus noticed her, and in one of his countless disguises, tricked her into union. Where pregnancy became impossible to hide, Artemis banished her. Hera, never missing an opportunity to punish the innocent, transformed her into a bear. Yet the tragedy didn't end there. Years later, her son, Arcus, nearly killed her while hunting. To spare them, Zeus cast both into the sky as constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Lovely, right? Except the ancient Greeks also believed those constellations never dipped below the horizon, cursed to wander the heavens eternally. Your steps take you deeper into the woods, and you hear another voice, this one trembling with sorrow. It belongs to Io, a mortal priestess of Hera, whose only mistake was catching Zeus's attention. To hide her from his wife, Zeus transformed Io into a cow. Yes, a cow. Imagine the Tinder profile for that. Hera, of course, wasn't fooled. She sent a gadfly to torment Io, driving her across the world in misery. Io eventually regained her human form, but only after years of wandering, her romance little more than suffering. Here's a historical reminder that softens these tales slightly. Many of these myths weren't just love stories. They explain geography, constellations, or sacred rituals. For example, Io's wanderings were tied to the naming of the Ionian Sea. To the Greeks, tragedy wasn't pointless. It was woven into their landscape. Scholars still argue whether these myths should be read as divine warnings against pride or as reflections of very human fears, betrayal, jealousy, and the cost of desire. And for your odd little detail tonight, some storytellers claim Callisto's bare form made her so massive that her shadow frightened hunters even centuries later. Imagine camping, hearing growls in the dark, and whispering, "Relax, it's just Callisto overhead." Comforting, right? You pause now listening. The forest is heavy with the weight of all these broken lives. Semele consumed by fire. Callisto cursed among the stars. Io chased endlessly. These weren't queens like Europa, crowned and remembered, but victims of divine obsession. Their stories weren't about love at all, but about survival. And maybe that's the thread you've been following all along. Divine love is rarely gentle. It burns, transforms, destroys, and only sometimes redeems. You exhale slowly, letting the silence sink in, when a different sound breaks it. Murmurs, hushed voices, like scholars debating in a candlelit hall. Their tones rise and fall, arguing over what these tales truly mean. The myths fade into parchment, ink, and whispered theories. You've stepped into the realm not of gods, but of interpreters, the scholars, secrets, and scandals of Olympus. The forest fades, and suddenly you're standing in a vaulted hall, its ceiling lost in shadow. Candlelight flickers over long tables stacked with scrolls and clay tablets, their inked words curling like whispers across the centuries. The voices you heard grow louder now. Scholars bent over parchment, debating, quarreling, scribbling notes that feel almost as alive as the myths themselves. You've stepped into the afterlife of Olympus, where the stories of divine love are pulled apart, analyzed, and argued over endlessly. One scholar leans forward, declaring that Zeus's many affairs are not love stories at all, but political allegories. Each union represents conquest, he insists, a way to explain how cities or regions came under Zeus's domain. Another scholar rolls her eyes, countering that these tales are moral lessons disguised as gossip, warnings about jealousy, pride, or the dangers of unchecked desire. Scholars still argue whether these myths should be read as divine soap operas or as coded histories of power. You wander between their tables, listening. One scroll retells the tale of Hades and Persephone, but with a twist. Some ancient thinkers saw it not as abduction, but as marriage ritual, a symbolic descent that explained the agricultural cycle. To them, it wasn't a crime, but a cosmic necessity. Another parchment debates Aphrodite and Ares. Was their scandal meant to condemn lust or to celebrate the dangerous beauty of passion? Depends on who you ask and how much wine they've had. Here's your historical fact of the night. By the time of the philosopher Plato, myths of love were already being dissected. In his symposium, love is presented not just as desire, but as a ladder toward higher truth. Gods like Eros weren't merely gossip fodder. They became metaphors for the human soul striving for beauty and wisdom. Imagine taking the Ares-Aphrodite affair and saying, yes, but really it's about metaphysical balance. Talk about a stretch. Yet the debates weren't always so lofty. A quirky anecdote surfaces in your mind. One ancient commentator suggested that Zeus turning into golden rain for Danae was a sly metaphor for bribery, because apparently even the gods knew that wealth opens doors. Romance, he scoffed. Please, that was a political transaction with sparkles. The arguments swirl around you, voices overlapping in a chorus of interpretation. Some call the myths divine truth, others mere stories. Some insist they were tools of control, designed to shape mortal behavior. You catch snippets. Callisto's curse teaches chastity. No, it explains constellations. Nonsense, it's just Zeus being Zeus. And realize that the debate is endless, as alive as the myths themselves. You can't help but smile. Because isn't that the real magic of these stories? Not whether they're moral or scandalous, literal or symbolic, but that they survive, shifting with each retelling. Each listener, whether a philosopher in Athens or you now, drifting in candlelit imagination, reshapes them into something personal. The candles gutter, and the hall begins to dissolve, the scrolls curling into sparks of light. The voices of scholars fade, replaced by something warmer, the low crackle of a hearth fire. You're no longer among ink and parchment, but seated before flames that glow like embers of Olympus itself. The debates are over. What lingers now is feeling, the eternal firelight of divine romance. The hall of parchment and candlelight fades, and in its place, a fire flickers. You sit before it, cross-legged on smooth stone, while sparks drift upward like miniature stars, fading into the night air. The glow is soft, steady, not thunderous like Zeus's lightning or fierce like Ares's flame. It's gentler, a quiet ember that asks you not to rush but to linger. The fire feels like Olympus itself, remembering. Each crackle carries an echo of the love stories you've wandered through, Zeus and Hera's endless quarrels, Hades and Persephone's shadowed bond, Apollo chasing Daphne until she became a laurel, Artemis watching Orion's star rise without her, Ares and Aphrodite's scandal, Hephaestus's lonely forge, Hermes' fleeting flirts, Dionysus's redemption of Ariadne, Eros and Psyche's triumph of trust, Zeus's mortal queens, and the tragedies of their fate, all glowing in memory, like logs piled together, each burning in its own hue. You lean closer. The warmth brushes your face, wrapping you in that peculiar mix of melancholy and comfort that comes at the end of long storytelling. These myths weren't just romances. They were mirrors of human life. They showed desire as a force that could heal or harm, passion that could crown or curse. And isn't that the strange beauty of it? The gods weren't perfect. They weren't even particularly good role models. They were exaggerated reflections of us, our flaws, our hopes, our longing to matter, to be seen, to be loved. Here's your final historical spark. Ancient Greeks didn't just tell these stories for entertainment. They lived them. Festivals for Dionysus included plays about love and betrayal. Couples prayed to Aphrodite for harmony, even while knowing her own marriage was a battlefield. Farmers whispered Persephone's name when planting seeds, hoping for her return to the earth. Love wasn't abstract. It was sacred, seasonal, and sometimes terrifying. And your quirky note for the night? One festival in Athens, the Anthesteria, celebrated Dionysus with so much wine and revelry that people claimed the god himself wandered the streets, slipping into houses uninvited. Imagine explaining that to your spouse. No, really, honey, it was Dionysus who came in. Totally not me. The fire hums, steady now, no longer sparking wild but glowing like the heart of Olympus after a storm. You realize something simple, something quiet. The gods' romances endure not because they were perfect, but because they were messy. And maybe that's the secret. We remember what feels human, even when wrapped in divinity. The flames lower, shrinking into embers. You exhale, letting the warmth seep into your bones. The stories are done, but the glow remains, pulsing in rhythm with your heartbeat. The night invites you to rest. The gods will keep whispering their tales in the stars, but for now, the fire is yours. The fire dwindles into soft embers, and with it, your journey slows. The air is cool now, almost weightless, as though Olympus itself exhales after the long parade of stories. You sit back, letting your shoulders loosen, your breath deepen, and the warmth of the night settle into something gentle. The gods are quiet. No lightning flashes, no jealous whispers, no scandals echoing in marble halls. Just the faint hum of the universe, as if the constellations you followed are watching over you in calm silence. Callisto drifts as a bear across the sky. Persephone's cycle moves quietly beneath the soil. Aphrodite's star flickers on the horizon. They're not demanding your attention anymore. They're keeping you company, like watchful guardians in the dark. Your mind drifts over the loves you've heard. Messy, fiery, tr.